But at the end of the day, for us, we need to be thinking how each of those local platforms can influence the type of creative ideas we come up with.
On today's episode, we are featuring Will Fernandez, who is a global client partner with Wunderman Thompson, where he oversees the strategic growth of some of the agency's most ambitious clients. Prior to Wunderman Thompson, Will joined the WPP Fellowship Program, working across the world's largest marketing services company to help provide end-to-end creative transformation. Will started his career working in government with stints in the United States Peace Corps mission in Costa Rica and in the Obama administration's National Economic Council. When Will isn't collaborating with clients, he's either traveling to new cities, trying out new recipes, or watching NBA basketball. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the exciting journey of Will Fernandez. How are you, Will?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's great pleasure to have you here on the show. Uh, right, so I want to go back in time and understand. Do you remember the moment that you felt that advertising, or more generally, storytelling is a viable career option for you?
Oh, wow. Well, storytelling probably my entire life. I think my mom has always been trying to shut me up ever since I was born. So I think on that point, it's probably something that's always been there. But advertising specifically, it's probably not something that kind of immediately came to mind as a career that I wanted to pursue. And it's not because I've had a change in opinion or that it wasn't something that I originally considered. It was just, for me, it's just something I didn't have much exposure to. A lot of my early time, both in college and immediately after college, was focused on kind of a public service career. So really working with governments and local communities to provide, the very best services that we could to, local people. And for me, it wasn't really until kind of a opportunity came up with one of the larger advertising holding companies, WPP, that I really saw the opportunity of a career that could be a bit like this, that you had the chance, yes, to work with big brands, but also get to work with, clients like the United Nations or, clients who are focused on making a really, inclusive and major impact into their customer sets, like a Unilever, for example, who focus on purpose-led marketing. So that, I guess, idea or I guess concept that creativity has this potential to drive positive social change became something that was really eye-opening to me and quite inspiring. So I think once I had that opportunity to kind of join WPP, learn more about this field, learn more about the people who worked in it, I guess that's when my interest turned more into a passion. And I think from there, it's just been, most importantly, just getting to know more kind of these brilliantly passionate and creative individuals who work within the industry. Once you start meeting more of them, it's hard to imagine yourself doing something else.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a fascinating story because usually people think that it's like some big event or some crazy idea that they stumble upon that changes the course of their life. But sometimes it could be as basic as having an opportunity to just naturally explore a different industry. And I think that's a key point there because a lot of people keep waiting for that big event in their life where they feel like, oh, I'll just wait for something to happen and that will change the course of my life. But some it doesn't have to be that way. You could just get into something, just experiment with it, and might that into a career. So yeah, I think it's great.
I think a lot of us can be, I guess, a bit, for lack of a better word, stuck in a rut, trying to wait for that bigger sign to come down the road to us, and a bit paralyzed because there's so many options out there. But I think at the end of the day, if you start experimenting, you start trying different things, you'll realize quite quickly what you like and probably a bit quicker what you don't like. and that makes it an exciting experience, and hopefully something that you do find something that you can call a passion over time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's very well said. Now, this is something interesting about you, and I've been curious about it ever since I first got in touch with you. You pursued a bachelor's in history at University of Chicago. Now, of course, history can play a role in advertising, but I mean, fundamentally, they are two separate fields. So, has your degree ever come in handy in your advertising career so far?
It's a good question. I think it's a bit of yes and no. So, does my knowledge of the development of early 20th century US political parties come into the way I think about ads? Probably not. But in terms of the way that like a history degree can really help you think strategically around movements and narratives, is almost an ideal training for a career in advertising marketing, because once again you're trying to figure out how do I make a very complex thing sometimes be very, very simple, that it can fit into a minute long ad, a 30-second reel, or a 5-second TikTok promotion. And so it's trying to figure out how you're putting that into clear and concise frameworks. With that said, though, history was what I love. I love the University of Chicago. I'm a very proud alum. But with that said, I think you can look at almost any degree and find a bit of application if you wanted to pursue a career in advertising, because you just have to have a base interest in people and what drives all of us to do what we do. So, in our field, you have people who have psychology backgrounds, you have people with biology backgrounds, but then you have your arts majors for obvious reasons who come here and want to create amazing creative work. And then I think the more you look at how the field is growing and is utilizing other tools, such as data and emerging technologies, you then see more people from STEM backgrounds, from maths, computer sciences, joining kind of the broader marketing industry as well. So it doesn't really have a limit in terms of your starting point. I think it's more around your focus in the field and that perception on wanting to better understand people and what drives them.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I come from a very analytical field like finance. I used to work in investment banking. So when I was thinking of doing something in media, it almost didn't make sense. I'm like, what what would a guy with Excel sheets and formulas and equations would do in media, right? But I just figured that okay, I could be on the business side of it. I could be a producer and help raise money for directors or produce my own films. But because I know how to do fundraising or I know how to manage money, that will make sure that I'll be more resourceful than, let's say, other people who are just doing it by trial and error.
Yeah.
So I had my own doubts, and a lot of people around me said that, hey, what would a finance guy do in media? But now it's like 3 years later and things seem to be going well. So I don't think it was a bad move.
Yeah, and look at you now. You're a content creator. Nothing's a real blockade if once again you're, I guess, passionate about it and willing to take the time to learn the craft. I really think that, especially when you look at some agencies and some client work today, honestly, you can just do a lot of the stuff that we're doing off of your phone. And that's not to downplay anyone. That's only to talk about the democratization of what this field is all about and what you can do if you are either strapped for cash or you're really wanting to have a distinct view of how you're using your tools in a more effective way. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great that you mentioned that, because a lot of people again feel that block that okay, unless I have like $1 million budget, I cannot achieve a certain creative vision. But yeah, you don't need that much money. Like you could get by with like 4 or 5 thousand, or if you're really creative with your skills in editing. But yeah, it's not really a limiting factor, as I would say. Now you are based in London, and Wunderman Thompson has offices in New York as well. So
What do you think is, the difference in approach, the way, let's say, the advertising is done in the UK versus a market like India or US, where, they have different bents of mind to look at how things are advertised?
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any difference between the sound of being in a downtown area. So apologies for the car going by just then. I don't know if you heard that. But in terms of the, I guess,
I
regional
did, and that
differences,
was a nice save.
yeah, in terms of the regional differences that I think you have when it comes to advertising, I think there are a number of things, and I find it really interesting to kind of figure out where you can find the best creative ideas, and then where you can find the most interesting executions. And so, the way individual markets, whether it's the U.S., UK, India, etc., is really looking on a few areas. So the cultural nuances that come with languages and the media influences that you have. So, is there a popular movie or a popular actor or popular story that everyone knows and can be remixed in a certain way that immediately becomes influential, iconic, and also inspiring? And then you get down to the platforms, which I think is probably the biggest barrier you have or biggest difference you have on a regional level is what actual platforms do people engage with when taking in media or taking in their daily experience of just walking around, right? So how you're using tube advertisements here in London and the ability to go to the underground and use that as a true media vehicle is super important and opening up more and more as we're coming out of the pandemic now, as people are wanting to get out and see their friends for the first time in a while. Well, at the same time, you can look at a country like China, which obviously the entire world has been dealing with the pandemic, but in terms of their response and the way they think around marketing, it's everyone talks about being mobile first. They are a country that is so far ahead in understanding how marketing and digital experiences need to be mobile first because everything's integrated in terms of the communication you have, the experience and education around a product and service, and the purchase of that final product or service. Because everything that they've built is all around making sure that there is the least amount of friction possible, and a lot of that's built off of the platforms, the Alibabas, Taomal's of the world. But at the end of the day, for us, we need to be thinking how each of those local platforms can influence the type of creative ideas we come up with. And so for us, it can be anything from those digital activations to big out of home experiential work, which can be quite fun. For example, if you look in New York, you have Fearless Girl, which in and of itself is an amazing and provocative piece of advertising and marketing around female empowerment in the finance community. But it's a statue, and that can be something that's quite different in terms of the way you think around what's going to work best and get the most reach for your advertising dollar. And I think the only other consideration when you think around the differences in approaches for advertising and marketing probably comes down to the legal distinctions, especially around data. It's becoming more of an issue every single day. And it's that kind of delicate balance that every brand is having to think around between privacy and personalization. Because the fact is, every market and every region has different standards for data compliance. And all the while, you're hearing a dream within marketing, which in some ways can be a reality in terms of creating perfectly personalized communications, one-to-one touches, ways that are continually inspiring and surprising customers. These are great buzzwords, but if the legal system that you're working in doesn't allow you to use data in that way, then it's not going to be the most relevant strategy for you. And I know that more so now, having lived in London, having lived in Europe more broadly, as you're looking at GDPR and how that influences your marketing choices. You're seeing that a bit more in California now in terms of the way you're looking at data regulation, and obviously there's broader discussion, not just in the U.S. but more broadly in the global context around what is going to be the future of data privacy and data compliance laws. So, those would be kind of the major areas that I kind of look to when you're saying differences in approach for advertising today.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a really great, uh, analysis of how this cultural differences determine the kind of experiences the ads or brands rather look to provide. I'm sure you must be aware of this Netflix series called La Casa de Papel, or
Yeah.
Money Heist, as it's called here in US, and it is such a popular. It like of course it's popular all over the world now, but it gained sort of this, you know, popularity in India, and people are huge fans of it. Even though it's a Spanish show, but because there are subtitles, people enjoy and love the experience. Recently, I think they have now a real life experience that they're doing in partnership with Netflix, where there will be like a reconstruction of the bank vault, and essentially you can participate in this sort of paintballish or like laser tag kind of situation where you have to go one on one with this fake military agents and stuff like that to pull off a
That's
heist.
amazing.
And I just feel, yeah, I just feel that's such a great idea, because now it's not only about experiencing a particular piece of content through a digital medium. Now you have sort of this lifelong bond with it, because now you participated in something that you only saw on TV or on your computer, and that goes so much farther than saying that, hey, here's a discount, or hey, here are some like goodies from the show. And I think I don't see that so much happening in like India or like Eastern
Mm.
Asian countries. But in the West, like if there is any possibility of turning a digital experience into something that people can experience in real life, people jump on those kind of opportunities. So I put my name in the waiting list for being one of the money heist participants. Let's see if
Oh,
I get
amazing.
through it. But
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's fun. So like when brands come up with these kind of experiences rather than just another piece of content, I think that makes for a much more interesting levels of engagement, rather than just saying that, hey, here's another episode, or hey, here's another season. um,
Yeah, and no,
so
I think
yeah,
that's I
that's
think that's really really good point because for us we continually focus in terms of discussing with brands kind of how you think around yes your communication and brand strategy, but that experience that you have all throughout it can be really fun outdoor experiences like the ones you're talking about. And there are a few from our network that are really cool. There was one piece that was done with Google a few years back, might have been, yeah, 2 years ago, where they were launching the new edition of the Google Home. And the whole thing was trying to show all the different features that Google Home can, do for you and enact once you're in your house. And so basically, they had kitted out this giant warehouse, I think, in the center of Chicago, to be a putt putt center. So doing your game of mini golf, but all of the obstacles were activated by saying, "Hey Google, could you move the fan? Hey Google, could you do this?" And actively showing you the product features while also having a kind of unforgettable experience which you can Instagram and send to your friends and share. So for me, I think that's a really lovely way of looking at it, but you also can look at the, I think, part of marketing and part of advertising that probably gets overlooked because it can be seen as just the day-to-day foundations of a brand, which is how do you set up your customer service line, what does your return policy look and feel like when they call up or they go on the website? Each of those touch points and experiences can build or break a brand. I'm not going to name any names, but I think we've
Yeah.
all had experiences with whether it's big kind of traditional companies where we'll call them up, be on the line for 7, 8 hours, and feel, why did I ever get involved with this brand in the first place? And I'm absolutely going to be switching sometime soon.
Yes. Yeah, I've been on few calls like that ever since moving to the US. So yeah, I can vouch for those kind of bad experiences. And I really wish that, they were a bit more proactive in understanding that customer service or other touch points also play a huge role in how the brand builds its identity. So yeah, I also won't name names, but these people know who they are. So
Exactly.
so is that now of course you also alluded to a little bit to the data privacy laws and how that is shaping the nature of how advertising and in general the messaging that is done by companies across the world. To what extent do you leverage big data and analytics in driving the insights or coming up with unique approaches to advertising?
No, I mean it is the question of the moment, and I think it's not going away anytime soon in terms of needing to have a more robust and mature approach to understanding data and thinking through how those create real insights for your company. So, for our way of thinking at Wunderman Thompson, data is kind of core to any type of project we take on. And I think the way we typically think about it is, I guess, in three distinct areas, is that all data is trying to do is help you better understand people, journeys, and outcomes. And in people, it's understanding who they are, what drives them, what's going to be the things that they resonate most with. Journeys is when you look at those people and they're in their lives, how are they interacting with your brand on a day-to-day touch point? They might not do it at all, they might do it a ton, and figuring out where are the opportunities to continue to make amazing signature moments with those individuals, where you see it as a real gain for your company and your brand. And then also, it's helpful to use data to understand what are the pain points for customers right now. So you first have people, you then have journeys, and then the final is outcomes. And for every business, when you're thinking around advertising, it is an outcome driven business. Now, a lot of people might say, and some procurement leads will just say it's an output driven business, but it really isn't. It's creating a
Yeah.
product, a piece of content, an experience, which is hopefully going to drive sales. And what we need to do as a company, as an agency, is continually, prove that the outcomes that we're generating are the best that they can be. And if they're not, how are we going to optimize them to be better? So those are kind of talking points on the top line, but I think when it becomes more exciting is when you get
Yeah.
into the actual case studies of how data is being used. So, once again, highly technical bits can be interesting, especially from a business point of view, around how you can increase effectiveness and reduce your marketing spend for platforms like paid media and your CRM email channels. That's really good and important and things that people should invest in. But then you also have more kind of blue sky creative applications and experiments around how can AI be creative? How can it, quote unquote, replace the creative department? Will we need copywriters? Will we need directors? These are like the buzz word questions that you'll see all across the industry. And the answer to there is no. they will help to augment human development and design. But there are really interesting cases, and I think one of the reasons why I love working at Wunderman Thompson is we invest in this space so much that we have hundreds of leading data experts who help influence our creative output every day. And two main examples for me is there's a piece of work that we did in Mexico with the Ministry of Health in partnership with our client GSK to basically create the world's most effective flu tracker. And it basically took all of these different data points, put them in a predictive algorithm to identify where and when the next flu outbreak would be in Mexico City. And the reason GSK did this is one, it's an important service to provide, but two, they provide Theraflu. And as a brand, it is there to protect people at that most vulnerable moment. And so it's opportunities like that where you're taking data on a super targeted level to create a service that's hyper personalized, which is something you couldn't do before without these tools and without machine learning. And then on the other side, talking about things that can get like big content eyeballs and being like, oh, that's amazing, super interesting, is a piece of work we had done a few years back for ING, the Dutch bank, who have this legacy of supporting the great, Dutch masters and the arts community in the Netherlands. And at the same time, doing that as an old bank can make you feel at times seem quite old and quite traditional. And so they wanted to figure out a way to respect the tradition of this investment to the arts community and distinctly to the Dutch masters, while at the same time being seen as an innovative company. And so they worked with us, and it was a bit of a labor of love from our chief creative officer globally when he was working on the local level. But basically, they took all of Rembrandt's paintings, put them into a deep learning algorithm to figure out how does he do his brushstrokes, how does he do his shadows, what types of profiles are put into his canvases, so that we could build the next Rembrandt, the first Rembrandt painting in over 100 years to come out. And it was, global news. And if you go and look at the next Rembrandt by ING, it is a painting that looks so starkly familiar to a painting that you've probably seen before. When you look in a book at who is Rembrandt, what does Rembrandt paint? But it was entirely artificial. It was entirely created by a computer. And so it's stuff like that where I think it's never going to replace the ideation point around we think that creating a Rembrandt and putting all of this Rembrandt data in there will create a reaction amongst people looking at it. That is something that a computer won't be able to do. But in terms of taking in all of that data, once you have that initial inspiration, it's a tool that can speed up and augment and create things that we've never seen before. So for me, if it isn't coming across clearly enough, I'm super excited about what data can do for advertising and marketing. And it's not just for the points that can be seen as more functional and highly effective. It's also helping to augment the creativity and the output that we have.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting that these case studies that you mention, and the different approach that they employed in trying to put the best foot forward for with their customers. And what I of course, data is still an evolving problem. So of course, Europe has GDPR framework, which sets great guidelines for how data should be handled and stored. US is still in the midst of a lot of confusion in terms of like, okay, how much do we need, can we share with advertisers? And iOS 14.5 has kind of sparked that debate again in terms of what data could be collected. I think India sort of is still struggling to figure out what it, because there's so many interest groups and there's like so much diversity. It's hard to like quantify everything in one set of rules. And so I think they're still sort of trying to figure out what would be the best way to move forward, because a lot of startups in India are now growing in the e-commerce space, which requires a huge, storage and collection of data, and that is now starting to raise some concerns, even for foreign VCs, where they're saying that, okay, if there are no strong data storage and retrieval rules, then we don't want that all this thing to just go to waste in future when government cracks down and says like, hey, this is illegal now, which means your entire company is illegal now. So you are essentially going out of business. So that it's a tricky space, more so for India right now. And
Yeah.
so I just hope that there is some, like, consensus moving forward, where people can feel more clarity in terms of how to go about data.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting one, especially when you start thinking not only from the competition point of view of how many different players are trying to make a name for themselves at a local level in India, but it's also thinking from a personalization and content development point of view, with the amount of languages and dialects and I guess distinct moments that you need to personalize around. It's such a vast canvas to be working on, and it's just trying to figure out how, if we were building an agency today, where would we start? How would we create something that had scale? In the same way, knowing that there will always be issues around the data protections that are put at a local level. It's a super interesting one, and then also I think there will be push, especially for e-commerce players, as you say, to figure out how do I just get more users to come on my platforms? How do I get, share of voice and awareness for that brand? I mean, it's going to be a really interesting one from an Indian standpoint, once again, because, sharing and getting people to be wanting to share their data for a service that they might not have used before can be a tricky sell. And even just getting signups for, let's follow up on email, or let's follow up in, a text message, is going to be an interesting challenge, and one that I certainly haven't had direct experience on, but I'd be super interested to learn more.
Yeah, yeah. I'll keep you posted on the developments as they go by, because we also have, like, my family businesses in India, and as they try to go from this traditional player that sold physical goods, and now making that transition into becoming a digital e-commerce player. These are the conversations that come up day to day in terms of developing a strategy, and then how does that play, like, how does marketing integrate into that. So yeah, I think these are really fascinating discussions. But talking of AI, I think a lot of filmmakers have tried to sort of uncover the formula for a blockbuster by just running AI engines on all these screenplays of like last 50 or 70 years of movies, and trying to predict what the next blockbuster will be. I think there is a startup in Israel that just does the same. Like, they have a very powerful AI engine that will give you the elements and the script essentially for your next blockbuster. And they claim that they have 85% success rate. Now, of course, I have not verified those claims, but it's an interesting thing that putting an AI engine into analyzing story structures and seeing what works and what doesn't work is really really fascinating to me. So I thought that, can I do this for podcast space? Like, can I work with someone who knows how to design a low level AI engine that could just crawl the YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, my bad, the podcasting universe to uncover some insights. And it did. So even though it was a very low level, low powered AI engine, it gave us the insight. So one of my friends who studied data science at NYU, she helped me design that, and she said that, okay, so what this is telling us is that there is no podcast right now that is in the relationship space that has a reality element to it. Like, the podcast episode is a reality show episode. So what, like, could you do something in that space? I'm like, okay, I can do a relationship podcast where two absolute strangers go on a blind date, and all they have is just the voice to listen. You don't see the person, so you cannot form any judgment or opinions. and they will be given a predetermined set of questions to choose from. And they could choose 10 out of 36 just to make sure that we have like a certain limit on the duration of the episode. But it worked. I mean, it's sparked so much interest that I went looking for 20 people, and I got, I think, like 200 or 300 applications. It's like, I'm like, okay, this is
What?
amazing. And so, yeah, and so the real process, like the real challenge was like narrowing it down to 20 people, that okay, how do I choose? Because everybody seems interesting, right? They all have their unique quirks and personality traits, and so it's that. But I understand when you say that, when ING decided that they will create the next Rembrandt, taking in all this, information from Rembrandt paintings. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, uh, I just so yeah, AI is kind of changing industries and approaches in ways that we don't even know how it's going to evolve. And I didn't think I could do a relationship podcast that is focused on this space, but once I did, it just blew up. Like now, everybody asks me when is the next season of that coming up. I'm like, okay, have some patience; it will come out. Hold your horses.
And with your blind dates, like what kind of format is it? I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I did some more digging, some more research, and I found that apparently there is this research done where there are 36 set of questions where, if two people on a date ask them those questions, it forms a basis of, building trust and attraction. And so it's a good, guide for your first date, so as to say, and then things can evolve from there. So it's the set of questions that sort of get increasingly personal but never invasive, in the sense that okay, you know it starts from like, what are the things you love about you like, and then what is your relationship with your mother, and how do you, well, like what is something that you would never do for your siblings and stuff like that. So it goes from general to more specific. But these are rooted in science. They actually did research and found that okay, these are 36 set of questions that build attraction. I thought, okay, if I can give people the option to choose 10 and ask each other those questions, then
Mhm.
we can see on like a minuscule level, does it lead to attraction or not. And while some of them do work out in certain ways, some of them don't, but they all kind of walk away with this unique experience that they've had, that okay, I went on a blind date on a podcast. So yeah, it's just it surprised me as well when it turned out to be such a success. So yeah, it's that. But yeah, AI is fascinating in that regard.
Absolutely, that's awesome. No, definitely excited. If you send me the link, I will definitely listen to that immediately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll send you the link to that. Now, of course, you know, brand building does not happen in a day. It's a long term exercise. But a lot of people look at it from a very short sightedness. They just look to reap the benefits in the short term without regard to how the brand will evolve in the long term. So, what according to you, like why should brands focus on the long term brand building aspect rather than
Mhm.
short term sales activation?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and one that I think for us, when we're trying to work with full budgets that brands have on a kind of a global stage, is a super difficult one to balance, but is so crucial. And I think for us, it comes back to a piece of research. I don't know if you guys or your listeners will know this. It's a piece that actually is from the UK, but two academics, Vinay and Field, did a kind of wide-ranging study of the most effective work that had been done in the advertising world, and kind of what's our kind of Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, the IPA. And within all of those reviews of the most effective work and how brands build themselves over time, what they saw is that the best brands in terms of growing had to have a 60-40 split. And that's 60% long term brand building, 40% short term activation. So it isn't an either or. It isn't all growth hacking and it isn't all traditional kind of TVC Super Bowl ads. It's a mix of the two. And it's trying to figure out for any customer, how are you thinking around the full funnel, right? How are you driving awareness of who your brand is,
Yeah.
what it stands for, giving them the right education level of what the products and services that you actually sell are and why they're different from your competitors. And then finally, at the end, what's going to be the communication that reminds them that now is the right time to buy and this is where you buy it. Because as you can think strategically across those three layers and balance it appropriately, you're going to have a business that continues to realize sustainable growth. If you start to over-index on short term, you will get a great sales uplift for your quarter, but you're actually going to be dampening long-term dollars into your company because I love the example of people when they talk about luxury cars. Like if you wanted to buy, I don't know, an Aston Martin, you wanted to feel like James Bond, right? When did that when did that kernel come into your head that you wanted to buy an Aston Martin? Is it the moment that you went on the lot and said, that's a really nice car? Or was it probably more likely when you saw James Bond going up against, whatever rival he had in a film and you said, I want to be more like him? It's probably the latter. And so that's it to me, kind of the epitome of what long-term brand building is all about is, yeah, sure, the consideration window for a luxury car is definitely going to be longer than a chocolate bar. But if you don't have long-term brand building communications that make your brand relevant, no one's going to be interested in what your brand has to say. And you can say we're for sale, but if no one wants it, it doesn't really matter. And so it's making sure that you have that right division between the two. And I think the best way I've heard it described as one of our heads of marketing automation and personalization, super data heavy guy that I absolutely love working with. He said, we can do all of these things to uplift your sales. And it was to a client during the pandemic. And then he had a slide which just had a few words on it. It said, reason to engage. And he said, everything that we're doing is going to help you. But unless they have a reason to engage with us, none of this matters. And it was just, a repeat to all of
Yeah.
those brand marketers and managers out there that you need to do both because over indexing on growth hacking is going to be good in the short term, but is not going to build the type of business and also build your career as a marketer who can deliver true sales and true growth for your business.
Yeah, yeah. And as you said, that's such a delicate balance to strike because when there are certain trends that are happening in the marketplace, companies want to cash in on that. But sometimes it sort of backfires and they don't realize that, okay, when you are doing long term building, that is building up a certain kind of image or trying to reach a certain kind of customer, and then you do something to, grab eyeballs in the short term, that actually hurts your long term prospects. And I see this with companies all the time. So my company also offers podcast creative consulting services, but largely podcasts at this point because you still cannot go out and shoot with a large crew. With podcasts, people feel like a lot of companies, especially some of the startups, fall into this trap thinking that, oh, if we just have a podcast, then we'll sound like cool and hip and we'll connect with the Gen Zs and the younger lots. But I'm like, yes, but your company is selling something like enterprise servers, and so I mean, if you're not making it like if you're not communicating that idea in a way that appeals to them or their universe, it's gonna fall on deaf ears. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes companies don't realize that. They're like, okay, if we just keep running ads, if we just keep bombarding people in that age group, it will convert. And I keep telling them that that's not how it works. If you have good content, you'll get a lot of organic reach up front, and then you can build on that momentum by layering it with paid ads. But don't just think that if you have like a big marketing budget, then you will land up on people's radar that would otherwise not. And so it's that. And on the flip side of that is, like, a lot of people who are hobbyist podcasters, or people who are individual podcasters, they think like, okay, if I just get certain episodes in, certain big names in, then I'll be acquired by Spotify for, I don't know, 10 or 15 million dollars. Like, if you look at the acquisitions in this space, then it's not that easy. Like, companies have invested in ads and marketing to the extent of millions of dollars to be able to claim, like, higher valuation, which then gives them that kind of acquisition price. It's not like, okay, I just have five headphones and bunch of interesting people, and that will be the case. And so it's that people a lot of them talk about Joe Rogan here and say that, hey man, just one guy got paid $150 million by Spotify for his podcast. Isn't that amazing? I want to be the next Joe Rogan. But I explain to people that yes, you could do that, but he's been doing podcasting for more than a decade, and he's Hollywood elite, so he knows people deep into the industry, and each influential guest gets him more eyeballs. So even without the acquisition, he was doing fine. He was making a lot of money on sponsorship anyway. So it's
Mm.
so it's that. So sometimes people don't understand that sometimes you have to first focus on long term brand building to be able to sell things in the short term. Then, uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, just it's hard argument sometimes. But well, I mean, that's how it works. So
Yeah, absolutely. And probably in response to that, there's also the point that the next Joe Rogan probably isn't going to be on a show that looks like the Joe Rogan experience. He's
yeah,
building something that, yes, over time has developed and turned into his way of doing long form interviews. But to get the same amount of notoriety, the same amount of monthly listeners, and also to just get the same amount of uh, open discussion from really interesting people, you probably have to do it in a different format to continue to bring something new to the conversation. Which, once again, I get going back to your example of, how can AI help me think through new concepts for shows? I think that's brilliant. And I think that's spot on, because you're going to need to find different ways to have your content stand out in ways that are experimental. And then also, being very open to the feedback that you are getting from people, as saying, oh, this works, this didn't work as much for me, what if we did it with this person, what if you did it with that person. I honestly like putting something out there early and testing it with customers and testing it with users, for me is the best way to go. But once again, I know that there can be a bit of hesitancy when your marketing budget might be smaller than you'd like, around what should we test, and if we should test something, we need to make sure it's really well reasoned out. So within that kind of rational
yeah,
deduction and rational reasoning process, you might take out some of the best ideas because they don't seem inherently like they may work, but they might actually do gangbusters in the marketplace. One of my former colleagues when I worked at Ogilvy, Rory Sutherland. He's an absolute legend in the field, and he's so funny to be around. But one of his, best anecdotes, or one of the anecdotes that I take away most, is if you're looking for the person who's going to beat Coca-Cola as one of the top brands in the world in terms of one of the most talked about soft drinks. You want to compete on price, you want to compete on taste, and you want to compete on volume. However, probably one of the most successful brands at breaking into the soft drink space and disrupting some of the market share that Coke has is Red Bull. A drink that is more expensive, is in a smaller quantity,
yeah,
and if we're fair about it, probably tastes a lot worse than having a Coca-Cola. But they built a brand around it, which is embracing the people who drink it. And it might not be the most rational decision, and in the way that they then market it, it might not be the most inherent and safe option for a lot of marketers, but it's done incredibly well. And so that's the one thing that I wish people do more of is the experimentation around those platforms. It's so important for, yes, advertising, but any type of media and content business.
Yeah, yeah. And Red Bull has emerged such a strong brand in recent years, not only through their association with this offbeat sports events like motocross and skateboarding and things like that. I remember watching on their YouTube channel where they had like some Danish village tradition where you have to like run up a pole and like land safely to win a prize or something, and that the entire thing was sponsored by Red Bull. And I'm like, okay, they're going like way deeper into the local traditions and people. So it's this large global brand where you associate it with like excitement and adrenaline, but it also is making impact in those little corners where people wouldn't think otherwise of Red Bull to be associated with something like this. So it's great. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Red Bull is one of the exciting brands that's out there.
It's still the case today. And what I love is when a brand really understands who it is and what they're trying to do through every single channel they talk to customers with. If you go on Red Bull's Instagram, they know their brand is all about being active, getting out there. So nothing about the Red Bull brand should be static. And if you just go through, everything is a story, everything is a video. Like, it is all about showing people getting out and doing extreme things. And that's what I absolutely love, is when a brand
Yeah,
can understand its principles and then start to apply that through every single piece of communication. And this is obviously one that Red Bull is, it's easy to say amazing brand, great marketing, but any brand, if they start to really understand who they are, can put these small touches into the way that they market themselves.
yeah, yeah. It's like I'm looking at their page right now, and it's just like every post gives you a sense of excitement, a sense of adventure, and I think that's that's just wonderful because that is, as you said, like a brand that is so in touch with the people that it wants to reach that it serves you that you know right in front of you, so you just instantly sort of connect with it. And so yeah, I think that's great. Now of course, uh, advertising, doing advertising and doing all this fun creative stuff is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the measurement, right? A lot of people hope that if they're putting a certain kind of budget behind it, whether it's big or small, they hope for it to turn into some sort of outcome. So whether it's sales or awareness, whatever like that. But and different marketing metrics offer different perspectives, different parts of the story. What are some of the marketing metrics that people should, like marketers should be aware of, regardless of the budget?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think our industry, no matter where you look from, small startups to the biggest enterprise companies in the world, I think we've all probably overcomplicated things in terms of the way we measure our effectiveness. You can look at, funnel conversion rates, your qualified sales leads, your customer acquisition costs, your lifetime value of, customer. All these things are important, but at the core, and probably lifetime value gets closer to it, is, are you actually achieving sales? Because at the end of the day, a lot of marketing campaigns and budgets are put to metrics that are either overly complicated for a single campaign to drive on. So lifetime value of a customer, you're not going to know that off of the Super Bowl ad that you put together. You can get an estimate of the uplift it can have in awareness, but in terms of full funnel metrics, much more difficult. Or on the other side, it can be even worse, where you have a client or you have a brand who's saying, right, likes is what we need today, and that's what this campaign's all about. For
Yeah,
us, it's super clear. Growth is the most difficult thing for any company today, um, especially given the global pandemic and all the other forces that have, I guess, intensified the competitive field that brands are playing within today. If you're not growing and you're not doing things that demonstrate clear avenues to growth, both in short term and long term, then it really doesn't matter. And I think it gives even further to say that if agencies can't evaluate the effectiveness that their work does to drive business growth and sales, then their clients won't be able to either. And if their clients can't identify where tangible growth is coming from when it comes to their marketing budget, then they're probably not going to be in that job much longer, because their sole job today is to make sure that their companies continue to have that relationship with customers and drive sales. So it's imperative for us to make sure that any conversation that we have around advertising and marketing is first and foremost a business conversation. That we need to figure out what are the overall business objectives. Do we need to go into a new market? Do we need to launch a new product with a new target audience? And what are the differences that we need to see in uplift of sales? There's a recruitment campaign that we just got in, and I'm just very clear with the client of saying, with this recruitment campaign, how many applications do you actually need come end of year for this to have been a success? And what does that mean to your business? And then once we have that clear business objective, we can then find the effective measurement tools to get them closer to aligning their business objective to their marketing campaigns. But I think once again, it's a incredibly important field around building measurement frameworks that are aligned with all of the good campaigns that you're doing. But if it doesn't have that upper level, that ladder up to the overall business objectives, then you're not going to be as effective as a business. And something that I think a lot of agencies can spend time focusing on the wrong things, whether it's their own point of view in terms of what they think matters, or it's some of the maturity around thinking around the marketing role within a lot of brands. And honestly, I'd love for marketing to get more credit in terms of driving businesses. Not only because it's helpful for me, but I think it's the truth. And I think having marketers have a bit more swagger to basically say that they are the ones who best understand the customer and can help really innovate is the place where some of the most exciting brands play. When you look at a Nike and you say, oh, I'd love to work at Nike, or I'd love to work at Red Bull, because they're companies who are brand first, who understand that then all of their products become touch points for them to have exciting conversations over. And you also see it with Apple, you also see it with Tesla. They're brands that are immediately understanding who they are, but each of those activations, each of those launches is directly aligned with what they need to be returning to their shareholders. So that to me is kind of one of the biggest gripes that I have around measurement and marketing is just, let's keep it simple, let's cut it back to sales, and let's build good businesses.
Yeah, yeah. And because I've seen my family business see like a newspaper advertisement or any sort of advertisement as an event, I understand that need to drive sales. And because having a full front page ad in any newspaper is expensive, that has a decent level of circulation. And because my family business sort of operated in that universe where radio ads and print ads gave you better reach, and this was like way before social marketing investments were at the level that they are now. But this was let's say 10 years back. And so it's and we operate in a local market, so of course that becomes a much more better way to reach people. And I remember that a lot of the way the ad is designed and the way it is placed in the newspaper and meant how people will associate your identity with it, right? And that's the insight that the local guy who's doing desktop publishing at the printing press give you the insights on that. Okay, if you're using this kind of dimensions, then it won't go well, because this is generally the kind of feedback that we have gotten for people who go down that road. And so it's that, like, sort of this understanding and insights into uh, knowing that what is it that your brand will relate, your customers will relate to, and it all comes down to how much that converts into sales should be sort of the primary focus. I think a lot of brands, uh, are really not aware of what they are trying to get out of this marketing campaign. Sometimes they just see competitors do it, and that's why they want to do it. Sometimes they just do it because they want to, keep their memories alive in the minds of people. But if it does not connect on any level that converts into sales, then it's a futile exercise. And so I just hope that more brands are clear about how it aligns with their overall sales strategy, and then it is much more organic relationship that they could develop with brands or advertisers. So yeah, I think that's very well said. uh, Now, of course, industry is going through a lot of uh, changes, and a lot of new trends are emerging. What are some of the trends that are emerging in ad industry right now that excite you?
Mm. It's a good question because I think trends, yeah, it could be a bit all over the place in terms of what's actually going to last versus what's kind of interesting and fun. So, there could be different things around how brands are understanding their usage of new platforms like TikTok, which I find super interesting and fun, and also a bit odd that you'll have brands like P&G jumping into this space saying, right, we need a TikTok thing, which is great because we get to work with them to figure out what that actually means. And we were able to do it on a global level with kind of the safety dance and what they were thinking around, COVID prevention, and actually being a bit more distanced from the people around us, which is great. But I think the bigger thing for me, and calling it a trend is a bit belittling, I think. But the things that I'm most excited about is the fact that in advertising and marketing, the industry for the agency space, and brands obviously are following suit on this, is a real commitment to being more inclusive. And thinking across the full, spectrum of diversity. And for me, particularly, this it falls under all different, elements of identity. But for me, what's most exciting for our work is what we're doing for some of the most overlooked individuals in the world, which are people with disabilities. And not only are these people who don't see themselves in ads, don't see themselves in media, but they also aren't getting products built for them that they can actually use, and that are being shared with them in a way that they can actually engage with. And so, at Wunderman Thompson, we have an amazing lead, Christina Mallon, at a global level, who herself has a disability. She doesn't have use of either of her arms, but she's basically used that not as a barrier to her, doing her job or sharing her kind of marketing know-how. She's used that as a superpower. It is something that has given her a greater sense of empathy and understanding of a population which we're all going to be a part of at one point in time. As we grow older, we all take on different forms of disability, and we have to understand that if brands aren't really having a discussion around how they can make their experiences and products more accessible, then they're just missing out, not only in terms of doing the right thing, but in terms of building their business and building a consistent sales engine, which is working with people with and without disabilities. And so for us, kind of tangibly, what that looks like is work that we've done with Tommy Hilfiger in the States. So looking at how they're creating a whole new line of adaptive clothing for people with disabilities who can't button buttons or zippers, all the way to work that we just launched
Yeah.
actually like this past month for Unilever with what's their degree brand in the States, Rexona in other places, and Stripe and others. And this deodorant brand, as you look across the Unilever portfolio, lots of their brands have core purposes. But with Degree, they wanted to create a deodorant which was accessible to all, and also create a marketing team which better represents the actual world that we live in, that has people with disabilities working, contributing, and buying. And so they created the world's first adaptive deodorant stick. And from there, they've gotten massive amount of press coverage. But on top of that, they've started to actually answer some unmet needs. And the great part about that practice, and the great part about, I guess, once again, I'll put air quotes around this on a podcast, but like the trend of being more inclusive is the exciting bit around of it is you're actually having these big brands co-investing, co-collaborating, co-creating these products with their core consumers. And so we can bring on, focus groups of 10, 20, even, formats of 100 different individuals from the community feeding into this is how I've done my own version of this. This is how I've hacked it. This is how I deal with this issue on my daily point. And here are the pain points of the products that are in the marketplace today. And I think the more we can do work like that, not only raises the bar in terms of what we need to be doing to recognize the dignity and respect that everyone deserves, and having major brands help push that message. But on top of it, it's an incredibly untapped market for a lot of businesses that I think if you are looking here and saying, where should I go next in terms of launching a new product or a new service? Think about just adapting what you have to make it more accessible to folks who, as of yet, haven't had the opportunity to engage with it because you haven't been marketing to them in a way that makes sense to them. So that for me is kind of where I get most excited around where the ad industry is heading.
Yes, yes. I think that's such a great insight, and a lot of people don't factor in this idea that people with disabilities can also be an important asset to the workforce, uh, whether they are working on premises or remotely, and that's something that I think I could say from my experience is like in India, sort of disability is seen as this. As a sort of almost like a taboo, like people don't engage into the conversation or discussion around that. They just feel that okay, and I'm not speaking for all the Indians. I'm just saying that in certain circles, they are seen, people with disabilities are seen more as a burden rather than someone that they could empower and they could then like impact the society. And so I think I think there was recently a dating app that was created for disabled people, and I think I saw that it's like a few months back. But it's such a great initiative because what it does is that it gives these people usually struggle a lot to find a partner because in India there's this whole caste system, the arranged marriage situation. So people are looking for best partners, but also they also want that sort of flex for the society. And like okay, my son is married to like a doctor, or like my daughter is married to some great executive at some great company. So there are all these labels that also come with it, which puts the people who have a certain kind of disability on the background that okay, if you are having if you have a missing limb, or if you have a speech disorder or anything like that, then you are automatically out of that equation. And so having a dating app that connects people who understand each other's struggles on that level makes a lot of difference. And it's very inclusive in that sense that you are now bringing these people as part of the mix. And there's a business aspect to it, that yes, they want eventually want to monetize and all of those things, but it's also the real impact that it's having on people. And I know someone who actually lost his uh, foot in a train accident, but he survived. He was eventually able to find a partner on that platform, and he got married a couple of years back. But yeah, it's that. And that's such an important discussion that we all need to be having, because a lot of people don't realize the challenges of being one of those individuals, and only through empathy and inclusivity we can bring out that difference. So yeah, I think that's great. Thank you so much for highlighting that. uh, okay. Uh, so of course, the ad universe is sort of littered with a lot of ads, and things that are easily forgettable. And some people rise to the top and their campaigns do well for right reasons, and some people don't get there despite their best intentions and their efforts. What do you think are some of the, like, couple of underrated brands that you think have real potential, or that they are doing great things but have not received their due recognition?
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a good question because I think once again, and especially for students who are out there who want to get into advertising, this is actually something that I do have a bit of a gripe with if I see on an application. You could be, when you're talking about this question of what's the brand you like the most or what inspires you, you could be the 100th person to write, I like Nike. This is why I like Nike. Unless you have a very distinct point of view around why Nike is interesting, then I've probably heard it already. And I probably agree, but it's just not that interesting. I think it's much more interesting. And I think brands that are underrated are the ones that people don't expect that much of. And, for me, I think those can be some of the most fun opportunities where you get to talk to a brand that hasn't really invested creatively into their brand in a while, that is a bit more functional in nature. And then you say, why don't we do this? This might be a good space for you to make a name for yourself. And that could be all over the place. So I'll talk about examples that are closer to home here now, living in London, but there are plenty of examples all over the world that probably come to mind. So, for us, you look at BT, which is British Telecom, one of the big telecommunications companies in the country. And, for them, they're selling the regular services. They're selling your broadband, they're selling you mobile plans, they're doing everything that you'd imagine a big telco to do. And on top of that, they have a division, BT Sports, which is creating your package for different sporting opportunities that you can watch. You can watch the Premier League, you can watch cricket, you can watch whatever you want to watch when it comes to sports. But for us, there was a really interesting opportunity when BT was entering kind of their seventh season of having proper football audiences. They needed to go up against Sky, and they had tons of competition, but they also didn't have the budget to really beat Sky in terms of their promotion. So they said, right, we have 25% of the budget we had last year. What are we going to do? And actually, once you start having to think through the resources, you can actually be quite creative and think around new elements around how you're going to attract people to buy a BT Sports subscription. And what I loved in the team's thought process here is, right, we need to understand why people want to watch this content, what makes them love it, what makes it, relevant to them in their lives. And at the same time, what's something that can drive a mass amount of argument around? And to our discussion earlier, data is just a lovely talking point where people say, actually, I don't think data can create the most creative thing. I don't think data can predict my future. I don't think data can do X, Y, Z. And so a very simple concept came out, which was called unscripted. And it was the whole idea that you can't script football. And more broadly, you can't script sports. And that's why we love it, because it can be totally unconventional. It's totally in the moment, and you have to watch it the moment it happens, or you'll be the one hearing about it later and not being in the excitement and the enthralling roar of a good game. And so what they did is
Yeah.
they just took all of the data from the previous Premier League seasons. They put it through a learning algorithm, and they created the script of the season. An AI who predicted every game, every score, every injury, and every trade, all the way down to who won the Premier League at the end of the year.
Mm.
They then created that script, sent it to every commentator and all of the top players in the league, and they said, "Give us your reaction. What do you think?" And obviously, everyone goes mental. Everyone's like, "This is not the way the season will go. I'm not going to get injured in the third game. I definitely, actually, on that one, that was me. I definitely will get 4 goals in that game." It's all of this immense opportunity to say, a brand that not many people would have thought much of in terms of what it's going to stand for, what it's going to do conventionally, or at least I don't, because I haven't lived here my entire life. I'm coming as an outsider. But coming into the agency and seeing the work and the enthusiasm for a telco and what it can do creatively is really inspiring to me. And I think, you can see that across a wide variety of fields, not just for telcos, but you can see that for accounting companies. There's a lovely accounting service business that we have here called Sage,
Yeah.
which we're trying to figure out how Sage can be the tool that helps you see yourself as the boss. And enables you to be the boss of your life and your career. And so it's stuff like that, which quite tactical in a sense, but quite creative in terms of its application. And it can turn into some amazing ads from brands that I think people may, not think much of, or might be a bit underrated.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember the moment that in England won the World Cup in 2019, and I was in New York and I was live streaming the match, and I'm like, okay, this is well, India was already out of the run after semifinals, but I'm like, could this be the thing? Like, could England really win the World Cup this time? Like, could they achieve the ultimate success in the game that they invented? And I understand that excitement. So I was watching it closely, and of course, when they did win, it was like crazy. And I just reached out to all my friends in London and like, hey, finally England won. That's great, awesome. And I understand, like, sports evokes always these passionate reactions in people who follow it, and when you have something like unscripted, it evokes opinions even from people who are more laid back, more chill. They're like, yeah, whatever, I'll just enjoy the game. But when you start making conclusions that, okay, this player is going to get injured or traded, they're like, oh, now that's interesting, I don't think that's going to happen, and let me tell you why. So brilliant idea. I think that's it's just like when you give people the idea that their opinion matters, then they really speak their heart, and that just builds the conversation around the concept. And yeah, such amazing concept. I've never been to England, but it's my dream to watch an India versus England cricket match in Lords. So let's see if the tickets don't fly off the shelf very quickly, which is usually in like 30 minutes once they are made available. But hopefully soon. That would be fun.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
that's great. Yeah, it's just fun. Now, of course, creative awards, like, recognition are a huge part of what people do, especially in advertising, because so much goes into creating that 30-second experience or a 6-second experience. It's important to sort of also recognize the work that people have done on it. So, what are some of the creative awards that are part of the ad industry, and what is the general sort of sense about them in the industry? Are they looked up to? Like, do like agencies compete fiercely for them, or is it something just sort of nice to have uh, kind of situation?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So there are lots of different awards, as you can imagine, both from a kind of global, then working down to regional and local in terms of the prioritization of them. And then you also have kind of what they're trying to award. So are you awarding them on breakthrough creativity? Are you awarding them on the effectiveness of achieving their strategic outcome? Or is it some type of innovation point? And so, for us, every award is a good opportunity to help talk about our work and talk about the notoriety of our clients, which is fantastic. Um, but there are some awards that matter more than others, and so in terms of ones that really matter to us and what we want to make sure that we're showing up in well is you have the Cannes Film Festival, which many people will know for great directorial debuts. Cannes also has another festival all around creativity and advertising that we basically are able to go down and award and discuss and connect with clients to talk about raising their bar and continually looking at the most creative concepts in the world. Obviously, right now, we can't really go to the south of France to enjoy Cannes and its
Yeah,
overall beauty with clients. But in terms of the awards, it's still top notch and it's focused on creative breakthroughs across a variety of different sectors. So they will talk about what's the best, commercial, what's the best print ad, what's the best business transformation case. Because once again, you're looking at all different types of ways that we're applying creativity to the types of mediums that we're working in. So Cannes does sit pretty high up for agencies and is something that, from a competition standpoint, is a bit of your dessert after the meal of making all these ads and making all this great work throughout the year. And it isn't just winning an award for winning an award's sake. You do see greater uplift in terms of the types of sales and types of performance that brands have if they are consistently aiming for can winning work. And I think one of the big leaders in this space over the past few years is if you look at Burger King. Burger King is a brand that goes for big can winning work and will put out those types of brands around how do we make flame grilled more relevant? How do we make sure that it really seeps into everything that people understand in our brand? And Fernando Machado, who was their CMO for a while, he's just left to go work at Activision, but he was always looking for a great creative idea that could get notoriety at Cannes, yes, but help to once again build the brand for Burger King in a way that aligned with who their customers were and what they loved. And so, making work like that is going to compete is at times feels like you might be diverting away from what we talked about earlier around measurement and focusing on your business metric. Your business metric shouldn't be to win a can, but winning at can help you raise your
yeah,
overall bar in terms of the work that you are doing. So it's a helpful exercise in terms of really saying how creative are we being and are we testing ourselves throughout our creative process. So that's one, and then the other is the Effies, and the Effies, probably as their name gives away, are actually all about effectiveness. Is their whole focus is driving to understand what is going to be that strategic insight that helps a brand break through and really build their business. And those, you probably look on different levels or sides of the marketing agency. I think the creatives would love to win a can. bet the strategist would love to win an Effie. But when we look at the agency as a whole, we want to be winning both of those as well as all of the other awards that are distinctive in terms of the way that they looked at craft. So, D&AD is another big one. You talk about the pencils and the yellow pencil that's out there for top winning brands. It's another metric of success. And then a lot of the trade journals, whether it's Ad Age, Campaign, and others, really do a good job of also highlighting both top talent, top work, and also top agencies and brands. So being recognized on those lists is also something that's highly relevant and highly sought after. So those would be kind of the main awards and recognitions that I think any agency would be looking to compete in. But once again, the number one recognition for us is that our clients stay with us and that we grow their business together. So that's priority one. All of the awards hopefully will come as we're doing the work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's great that Khan's also recognizes, the general application of creativity rather than just filmmakers. Um, a lot of films that I've produced have not made it all the way there, but we have done well in the region in the sense like we have. I've been to a lot of European film festivals, a lot of them in New York, a lot of them in India, and yes, I think it's good to have in this is my personal opinion about filmmaking is that it is 90% of it is just like hard work. You are just always trying to bring together resources for that one shot, and once you're done you move on to the next. So awards, again, depending on what level you achieve them, can play a huge role in sort of making you stand out and really putting you in the midst of all the people in the industry where they want to work with you, they want to do projects with you. But then the other side of this awards, especially with films, is that now everything is a film festival now. There are online film festivals, and so those things do not really count, because I mean there are festivals, they're like, okay, as long as you pay us the application fee, we'll give you the official selection. And so that's sort of just undermining the work overall. And so I very consciously highlight when I work with people, brands specifically, when they want video production services, that I highlight that, okay, these are legit, proper, like in-person festivals where they have a jury and everything was done through due process, and it's not something that anybody with an application fee could get into. And that's sort of just to kind of build credibility that we know how to do effective storytelling on screen, and we can help you achieve a certain creative vision while also like working with the budget that you have. So it's that. And so awards certainly help to paint that picture where brands and individuals would know that, okay, what's the caliber of your performance, and based on that they could just sort of decide whether you are a good fit for them or not. But yeah, it's great that Effie's and Khans are like the top ones to aim for. So my next question to you is regarding the impact of coronavirus on the industry, because a lot of campaigns were like working ahead in full steam, and but once the coronavirus hit, a lot of people had to shift their tone, because now the daily routine has changed, and what people place emphasis on has changed. Like I've never seen people fight for toilet paper and bread in supermarkets, but well, it's just one of those things that coronavirus, helped me witness. So, how do you think brands and companies have pivoted when it came to coronavirus?
Yeah. It's a really good question. So with COVID, I think first and foremost, you had a lot of brands at the beginning trying to figure out, do I have something to say here at all? Because it's been devastating. The amount of lives that have been lost and the amount of people who've been sick is just absolutely crippling for a lot of countries around the world. And so for us, there is an additional hesitation as, is this a time that they need to hear from us? And for a lot of people, I think you saw a first wave of ads that went out, which is kind of the sad COVID ad, with an empty store, people at home feeling like they're away from their people with sad piano music in the background. And I think, yes, it's nice to show that you care, but is that a message that's actually going to resonate and matter to people? Or is it starting to recognize people who are doing amazing work and how you are supporting people? So, I think you know, it's one of our within the larger WPP group, our strongest brands that we work with is Dove. And I think what Dove has done during the pandemic is brilliant, because around them, it's all around kind of what natural beauty means. And for them, in the face of COVID-19, the, I guess, adjective, the thing that resonated most, or most synonymous with beauty, was courage. And it was the courage of frontline workers to be out there, and for us, telling those stories around what people actually care about and who are actually making a difference was much stronger than doing some of the more executional, oh, we hear you, we are ready for when the door opens back up type ads. So the Courage is Beautiful campaign for Dove was literally just going into hospitals at the end of people's shifts, taking quick videos and photos of nurses who had the marks of the masks on their face after multiple hour long shifts, which in and of itself can look quite harrowing, but that in itself, that image is beautiful, because that's the courage and that's the commitment that they're putting to it. So I think stuff like that, in terms of the tonality of ads, has changed. And then in terms of the way we put them together, I mean, overnight changes. You can't have the same type of production budgets. You can't have the same type of shoots with people in a studio or on premises for something that you could in the past. So the way we actually put together ads and follow COVID safe regulations has changed entirely. On most shoots now, you'll also have your kind of COVID analyst who's going to be there with you to help build out the right solution around how to best do this and still follow all of the right rules and regulations. So on that side of things, it's also changed quite dramatically. And yes, you'll hear the other buzzwords around how things are becoming more digitized, more focused on e-commerce. And yes, all of that is true as well. But I think the thing for me is just, I think the biggest change, not just for the now, but going forward, is thinking tonally, how does a brand have a more resonant purpose? The pandemic has really tested brands to figure out what that means and what that is. And I think brands who have done better during this period are the ones who kind of realize that the mic is, yes, theirs because they have the media spend, but it's not the right time for them to be the ones talking. It's giving that ownership, giving that platform to the people who are really making a difference.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of creativity has come out of brands when they're trying to tackle this subject matter. And of course, there were those sad piano music in the background ads, which then turned into hope when lockdown restrictions were eased, and it's great. A lot of companies try to model that. Uh, Emotion with their brand. Uh, I think the one that I really enjoyed recently, and this was on Snapchat. So Uber has this, thank you for getting a vaccine campaign, where you can donate rides to people where they will ride them to a vaccination center for free, and essentially that's for people who are older or who have fallen to hard times because of the pandemic. And I just the way they did it, it's like it's just the flashes of life that you had before COVID, and it's just like people out there having fun and this really nice hopeful music in the background, and it's sort of like compels you to feel like, okay, now that I'm vaccinated, can I do that for someone else? Like, could I donate a ride to someone else who needs it? So yeah, I mean, it's great how certain brands have been able to pivot and certain brands have been able to stand out because they felt that, okay, this crazy shoots and crazy budgets that we initially used to have, now that will be not the case for some time, so let's just bring out the more creativity that we can. And yeah, I think it's exciting. So now it will be interesting to see from your, like, historical background, that when you look back at these ads, let's say 5 or 10 years later, what new insights we will uncover and what new understanding we will have. Maybe this could be a case study in some ad school in future, where, like, coronavirus ads, or or one particular company and how they sort of turned it around in this time. So yeah, I think it's so exciting that we are witnessing these things as they unfold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last couple of questions. What would your advice be to people who are looking to be in the advertising industry full time, who are considering this as a full time career option?
Yeah. I've talked a lot in this podcast, I know, so I don't want to go on too much, but on additional advice to people who are wanting a career in advertising, it comes back to the guy who first hired me at WPP as a long-term strategist known as John Steele. And he said that he was looking for people who were interesting and interested in people around them. And I think that's probably the barometer that I'd have for anyone that I'm hiring, and also that I think are going to be successful in this field. So, in terms of being interested, you have all of the room and the fascination to learn about anything in this field. You can learn so much around how technology is changing our world. You could also be interested in how you take some of the major innovations in film and bring it into an advertising format. So be interested, learn things, have hobbies, be a collector of ideas, insights, and just go for that. But then at the same time, as you do that, it might be a bit chicken and egg. You're going to be interesting. Being interesting is, can feel at some points like too high a bar. Like, be interesting on command. I would probably be the least interesting person. But the thing about being interesting is just the fact that, like, you have an opinion. And I think that can be, at least at the beginning of my career when I was starting to doing interviews, and I wasn't getting all of the roles that I wanted to be getting. It was mostly because I said, "Oh, I'm willing to do anything. What do you have? What's available? How can I help? I'm flexible. I'm a fast learner," which is great. And you should be all those things. But you should also have a point of view around what you want to do specifically, or what you think you might be good at. And that point of interest and that point of fascination of why you think you could do it better than someone else, or why you think you could just do it well at all, is going to be something that piques my interest or piques someone in our industry's interest, because we all have points of view, and what our clients are looking for is someone who can persuasively build a strategy which is going to help them build their business. So if you're not interested and you can't express your point of view, it can take time, and you don't all have to do it at once. But being interested in the world around you will help you be more interesting. So if there's one thing, just go out there and continue to engage with new stuff and be a real explorer when it comes to your life. And that will, do wonders when it comes to your career, advertising or not.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great advice. And, uh, for me, like, the seeds of filmmaking were sown when one of the marketing professors in my undergrad program, which was in Mumbai, India, asked us to make a film. Doesn't have to be high budget, doesn't have to be very fancy. Just learn to tell a story on camera. And that was just one project that, a bunch of guys came together and we did it. But it opened up this whole new world of possibilities for me, that, okay, there's this, a new form of storytelling that you could do, that sure, you can write articles, you can give interviews, and that's one form of storytelling. But you could actually create experiences. You could, uh, you can heighten or dampen people's, like, certain emotions in people to make them feel a certain way. And that just was very powerful to me. Now, of course, I went into finance and I was doing storytelling through numbers there. But eventually it just came back all together where I felt like, okay, I can do both. Like I can run numbers for my company and make sure it does well financially and also be part of the creative mix. So it's that. And yes, I think, ad uh, industry is such a dynamic industry. It's ever evolving. New ideas are always being, tested and tried. So being on the cutting edge of that, I think would be something that a lot of people could benefit from because for example, if you were interviewing me and if I told you that, hey, I created this new podcast about dating people, like blind dating people, I think that would pique your interest a little bit. If not, like whether you decide to hire me or not, that's like a broader discussion. But I'm just saying that something like that could really stand out, where like, okay, you saw things in a different way, you tried a different approach, and it's something that worked, it delivered. So just take that as, like, anyone who's listening or watching this, just take that as an indication of how you could be interesting by being interested, and vice versa. uh, right. Okay. Final question. What are some of the exciting projects that you're working on now? Of course, you don't need to reveal specific details, but in general, what is the direction in which you are working? Like, where is it? In which direction is it going?
So, yeah, I can't go into the details of each of the distinct brands, but the two areas that I find super fascinating around, one will be a live client opportunity, which I will debrand, and then the other is kind of an initiative that we're taking on at Wunderman Thompson. So, on the one that's debranded, we're doing a really interesting project all around employee experience. And for me, this is a place where going into advertising, I never thought I'd be working with HR. I never thought that every single day I'd be connecting with my HR buddies and talking about how we can build better businesses in terms of the experiences employees have in their day to day work. But that's what we're doing. And we're doing it at scale for one of the biggest businesses in the world. And it's so exciting because you get to, outside of trying to sell a product, try and sell a company to someone who's going to work there, they're going to get their payment there, and they're going to have the majority of their human relationships through their 9 to 5 there. And so for me, that's a space that's super interesting, as an exciting project for us. We do it on a few other clients already, but this one in particular, for me, is a bit of a passion and a half right now, which has been really interesting. I think, coming once again to your question about COVID, coming out of COVID, I think having, working remotely as a part of a larger organization, having a clear understanding of that experience is going to be even more important, and why I think brands need to be thinking, not just from a functional HR foundations point of view, but think creatively around how you make touch points and reasons for people to work for you, rather than just a paycheck and a reliable shift schedule. So that's the first one. And then the second is a project that I'm super proud of our teams for running. And we started out of the UK, but it's now become a global initiative for Wunderman Thompson, which is called Fun Fem. And so at Wunderman Thompson, you probably got it from my spiel about measurement and growth. For us, growth is the most important thing. Yes, for the majority of organizations, that's sales. For others, though, it can be helping to, promote a social cause or have a real impact in the world. And so for us, what we wanted to look at is, if our goal is, inspiring growth for the most ambitious brands in the world, usually those are the biggest brands in the world. But that doesn't mean, and that doesn't necessarily equate, because some of the most ambitious brands are things that are just getting cooked up at someone's dinner table right now around a new plan or a new idea. And so what we wanted to do is create the world's largest online database for female founded businesses, to tell their stories, to share their products, and to share that experience in one place. And Fun Fem, like the reason we're doing this is that if we're for the most ambitious brands in the world and supporting their growth, what could be more ambitious than starting your own business in a world during COVID 19 where the majority of the stakes are stacked against you? As a female founder, you're far less likely to get capital. You're far less likely to succeed in terms of long-term sustainable growth of your business. And there are a lot of inherent biases within the system. And what we want to be do is elevating the incredible entrepreneurs who are out there, giving them a platform to help, one, have their visibility, but also just tell their story in a more authentic and a more enriching way so that they can connect with that next consumer or that next funder. So for me, I am so passionate about that team. I think Fun Fem for us is going to be an initiative that we're just launching on a global stage. We started with International Women's Day this year as the soft launch, and we'll be continuing to roll out more content over the next few months as we go along. But I think this is an initiative that has tons of legs for us, and for, I think, more importantly, the businesses that we touch is something that I'm super excited to see the impact that we can drive on. So that's really, for me, what I'm most excited about.
That's great. So, a lot of exciting initiatives that you're working on. And yeah, I think, my mom is an entrepreneur herself. And so I see these issues that she struggles with raising funding and, not getting enough recognition for the work that she puts in. So it's a great initiative, I think, that will be a very empowering uh, effort for a lot of women where they feel that they are part of a larger network now, and they could finally start getting their due share, because uh, it's, I mean, that's a whole separate discussion, but I mean, yeah, women don't get their fair share of the work that they put in. So it's that. But yeah, I think that's exciting. And yeah, HR generally seems like a very sort of boring aspect of any business, but as someone who hires people for his team, I can tell you it's a very intensive process. It's going through the resumes, trying to compare strengths, and seeing who is the best fit. And it's just like, yeah, I have much more respect for people who hired me in the past, that they went through the ordeal that they went through to make sure that they hire the best person for their team or the company. So it's that. But yeah, so thank you so much for your time, Will. I think, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Like, just the length of the episode should indicate how much interesting this conversation was. And uh, I mean, I would genuinely say this, that if anybody is considering a career in advertising, they should, like, look at the enthusiasm that you brought to this conversation, and the way you spoke about specific studies and the aspects of it. It's just like, had I been not like had I been considering career options right now, I would have certainly gone down the advertising route after having this conversation with you. So that's great. And it just shows your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion for the projects and the projects that you have worked on. I think that's infectious. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, hopefully, I'll get to these projects that you're working on soon. And yeah, you enjoy the outcomes of your efforts. Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite and the conversation even more. And yeah, hopefully, once things open up, you can come over here and we can get to see that game at Lord's.
Absolutely, yes.